Cast.
Hello! Today I'm going to be talking about with two friends that have actually been on this podcast before about M. Night Shyamalan. Originally, I wanted to talk about specifically just the Glass trilogy, Unbreakable, Split, and In Glass, but as I was rewatching and researching, looking more into these films, I found that it's kind of impossible to talk about just this trilogy without at least referencing M. Night's career as a whole, you know, where he started out and where he is now. And so originally I wanted to talk about just the Glass trilogy, but I, now in today's episode we are going to be doing a sort of whole retrospective analysis on M. Night's whole career. And with me today, I have two friends who have already been on this podcast, William and Tabetha. Hello again.
Hi.
Hey,
Yeah, how are you guys doing?
super duper excited to do another podcast.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. So before we begin, I just want to ask you guys, what is your favorite and least favorite M. Night film?
That is really hard for me to decide. I will just come into this saying that I'm a big M. Night Shyamalan fan. Least favorite, I'll probably have to say, is The Last Airbender. I mean, yep. We'll get into that more in a little bit. I won't try to defend it too hard, but that's probably least favorite. And it's really hard to identify a favorite because each of them have really evoked such unique feelings in me in each one. Maybe Split. Yeah, maybe Split would be my favorite.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Avatar: The Last Airbender is definitely my least favorite M. Night movie.
No Avatar, just The Last Airbender. I don't want people thinking that the show, I don't want to tarnish the show's reputation.
And I think that's my biggest problem with the movie is that the show was so incredible and he had a lot of good to work with, and to create what he did, it just felt so wrong. And then my favorite is probably Sixth Sense. It's pretty uncontroversial as an opinion. It's a great film, good twist. The twist wasn't ruined for me before I watched it, which made the film even better. So yeah.
So I think all of us, our least favorite is Last Airbender. For me, that it definitely is because I grew up with the show, and to see the show be translated, adapted so poorly, just really irked me a lot. And my favorite is actually surprisingly Unbreakable. For the longest time, it was like Tabetha, Sixth Sense was my favorite, but then I watched Unbreakable a few years later. After watching Sixth Sense for the first time, I watched Unbreakable for the first time. I actually avoided it because I saw actually negative reviews from critics at the time. And at the time, critics did not did not really like this movie because they were constantly comparing it with Sixth Sense, and which I think I think that with a filmmaker, you should, when you review or analyze a film, you should do it separately, which is kind of ironic considering what we're doing today. But I vividly remember not wanting to watch Unbreakable, but then finally giving it a chance and being like, this is amazing. Like, critics at the time really didn't like this? Wow, I'm loving this movie. And I love that. Some people don't like the twist in Unbreakable, but personally, I love that twist. I actually slightly prefer that twist and that movie in general over Sixth Sense, so... Alright, so like I said before, we are going to be looking into the Glass trilogy, mainly that, but I also want to do a somewhat quick retrospective on M. Night's career. So M. Night's career is very interesting, to say the least. He did. I'm not going to include the two films that he did prior to Sixth Sense. He made
Praying with Anger and Wide Awake.
Right. I've never seen Praying with Anger. Wide Awake with Rosie O'Donnell is one of the most boring comedies I've ever watched. Not bad, not one of his worst films, but it was just so dull and not funny to me. So so yeah, we're mainly going to be talking about his memorable films like The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, which made him a breakout star. You know, people after those two films came out, like even though critics didn't really like Unbreakable, people are still referring to M. Night as the next Spielberg. You know, at the time, people were like, "Oh, M. Night," just like with the Wachowski brothers when the first Matrix came out, just like with Francis Ford Coppola when The Godfather came out, and Apocalypse Now, and George Lucas with the original Star Wars. With just like with all those directors, people were referring to M. Night with nothing but praise and being like, "Oh, he can do no wrong." And then he makes Signs and The Village, which both have a lot of really stupid things, but also a lot of really amazing things. And then following that, he makes Lady in the Water and The Happening, which are hilariously awful. Like those films clearly were not intended to be comedies, but they were. They were just so funny and not unintentionally funny and over the top. And then of course, Last Airbender. Sorry, I almost threw up.
I second that.
And then After Earth, which again is just taking itself way too seriously. That it takes itself so seriously that's actually funny. And then he kind of redeems himself with The Visit, which in case any people watching don't know, The Visit is a found footage film of two kids who visit their really weird and creepy grandparents. And then next is Split, and then Glass, which we'll get into those later. But it's interesting to look into his career and see like where he started out and where he is now. And why, just wanted to ask you guys, why do you think that his later films are like, regardless of what you think of them, why do you think that like his films are like his middle films like The Village and The Happening are not as well regarded? Like why his reputation went essentially down the toilet?
Well, I think just to back up a little bit, in really discerning who M. Night Shyamalan is, what he has done, and, you know, kind of the Nicolas Cage idea. Is he good? Is he bad? Is he so bad he's good? You know, or something like that. Where I really personally land on it, I think he's good. I think that when he was in his younger part of his career, he was full of vision, and he really wanted to portray something that he saw very clearly in his head, and he did a great job of it. Moving forward after that, he kept trying to stick to his shtick. No director wants to be boring, and he certainly hasn't been boring. Some people would say that he would try to force twists and things like that because, you know, it's what he's known for. But you have to kind of carve out your niche in the world, and I think he did a good job of that. I think in the middle, he was trying so much to follow up on his previous successes, and I don't think it's until his later ones, particularly Split and Glass, when he gets to come back to, you know, the trilogy, that he really gets to, you get the payoff of his earlier work, and he's found his place. And I really feel like anything that he makes going forward, he's a little more confident in who he is as a director now after he had that bit of a dip.
I think also his strong suit is taking a known genre and putting a little twist on it. That is something that when I see him go into like the superhero genre and do something totally different with it that you aren't really expecting, or the alien genre like Signs, I think that that's actually kind of a strong movie for him, because it's in this realm of taking what you expect and then putting it on its head, which you could say that about the twist endings that he has, but also about, I think, just the way that he handles the genre as a whole. Like, he takes the movie Signs and he creates like a family movie. Instead of focusing on like the big, like flashy alien things that he could be focusing on, he instead focuses on the family dynamics and the way that the family is exploring this really weird thing happening. And then, yeah, the same with superhero genre. I think that he's doing something interesting there. I actually like The Happening. Controversial opinion.
Me too.
I think that the idea is really interesting, and it's tried to be. It's been done again since then, like the same kinds of ideas. But I think that it was a really interesting idea to start with. And I actually a little like that it's kind of goofy. I think that some of the over-the-topness may have been part of the directing, I guess. Like, I think that some of the faces that they make and the weird scenes that happen are just a part of the overall vibe of the movie, which I think that he has sort of like a darkness to most of his films, mixed with sort of melancholy, mixed with sort of breaks of humor every now and again. So.
And darkness and light are two common themes. I mean, I won't say specific to him. You see it in stories since the beginning of time. But I like the way that he plays with darkness and light in, I'm pretty sure, each of his films.
I mean, I love The Happening. Every time I watch it, I have such a great time, but it is an objectively horrible movie. Like, with the acting from everyone. Not a single person is good in The Happening. Like, all of them are so over the top, and Mark Wahlberg and Zooey Deschanel specifically, just some. I mean, in their defense, though, the dialogue that they're given is so horrendously awful. Like, it's dry considering what they're actually going through. It's very like dry, stilted dialogue. But let me ask you: whenever you say that something, and I've heard you say it about plenty of movies, that something is objectively bad. Like, what I mean by that is that the filmmaking, like cinematography, editing, sound design, writing, directing, whatever, like technical aspects. When I say that a film is objectively bad, like let's just say that let me compare it to Domino's Pizza. It's objectively unhealthy pizza. Like pizza, certain dishes and foods in general are objectively unhealthy, are bad for you. But subjectively, like if you like Domino's Pizza, despite how unhealthy it is, then it's subjectively good, and that's what I mean when I refer to films as objectively good or bad. Like, to me, like you guys would probably think that the movie Hereditary, starring Toni Collette, I know you guys have very negative feelings towards that movie. You guys have acknowledged that like acting, filmmaking is good, but you guys don't really like that movie and the themes in it. So you guys would probably say that movie is subjectively bad, but objectively good.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, that is what we think.
And that's what I mean when I say that The Happening is subjectively amazing, but objectively horrible.
Okay, I mean, I could see a little bit of that, and I think you also, though, with all directors, but also with M. Night Shyamalan, you really need to be aware of, kind of like you were talking about earlier, where Unbreakable was apparently, it wasn't well received at the time, which also confuses me. But everything's a product.
Yeah.
Everything's a product of its time. And so when we look at some of these things through a critical lens, you either need to think, well, maybe he's just a little forward in his thinking. If maybe Unbreakable did poorly at that time, but is better received now.
Yeah,
maybe some things are going to be poorly received now, but will be better outside of their time because he's a forward thinker.
I think Unbreakable is a lot more well received now because of where the superhero genre has gone. Mm-hmm. Like, go back in time to 1999, 2000s, superhero films were nowhere near as popular. Like, at the time, the only really popular, somewhat well-received superhero movies were Blade and X-Men. Like, the superhero genre, like, people really like it's kind of a shock for certain people to go back and go back to time before like we've had the Marvel Cinematic Universe and when we were like analyzing like all these different things from different like superhero genres and now we have shows like Watchmen and The Boys, which are essentially superhero satires, like the satires on that genre and almost a criticism of certain aspects of that genre. But back in 2000, comic book movies, superhero movies were nowhere nearly as popular or as many. So, like, Unbreakable was sort of an anomaly on that because Unbreakable is also kind of a satire on like comic books and comic book stories and the superhero movies
And villains.
and villains, right? And that was that was very odd to many people, because most people at the time weren't really weren't really like as aware of superheroes or comic books or all that stuff. So I think that's also an aspect as to why Unbreakable wasn't nearly as well received. But I think that if that movie were to be released today, I think critics would appreciate it a lot more.
Which I think we see that in the two later episodes of the trilogy. It's a more realistic way to look at the superhero genre. I think that this is very much the way that superheroes would be handled. You'd think you were insane if you were one of the first super people, and people would try to cover it up. And we're not used to seeing that because we're used to seeing a Marvel Cinematic Universe because that's what we've all grown to love. And we're used to digesting this sort of like, oh yeah, superheroes. Everybody would love superheroes. Maybe there's some political issues with superheroes, but for the most part, yeah, of course they'd be out in the open and they'd be well received, and because we receive them well.
And I think that what Shyamalan did with superheroes is he kind of took a step back. We all have a very heightened, like, willing suspension of disbelief. We say, hey, we're all in for superheroes, even if it's so far-fetched. We want a superhero movie. And he stepped back a little bit and said, you don't have to have such a suspension of disbelief. This is a little bit more of a...
Right.
Yeah, it's easier to swallow, but there's also a little bit less going on. And a lot of people look at Shyamalan films and think, these feel pretty dry, because they aren't really the most action-intensive, because the scores of the movies, while absolutely beautiful, are understated, and in general, the plot is fairly slow-moving.
Right, yeah, no, that's M Night is known for, like, he purposely has a very like deliberately slow paced style. He's very ambitious. He loves his twists, and I think that that's why Last Airbender did not work, because if you look at the show is very fast paced, has very energetic, eccentric characters, and it's an action packed show. And M. Night Shyamalan is not known for crafting really well, exciting. His films aren't really exciting. They're deliberately slow-paced. Characters in his movies are purposely very meditative and quiet, and that's his style is the exact opposite of the style in Avatar: Last Airbender, and
it's
so
not fun and playful like the
right.
It's not,
and it's really a shame.
Children's show.
Yeah, it's really a shame. It could have gone so much better. It's my opinion that even with the poor acting, kind of a crummy script, and crammed together storyline, I'm still of the opinion it could have shaped into something good. I think, honestly, some of the changes that they made to the universe that we love are what really shot it in the foot. We look at it and like, well, why would you make that change? For instance, plug in anything. There are so many changes he made to the way that the universe worked, and we're just like, did that serve any cinematic purpose? Was there any reason that you changed that? And I think ultimately that's what derailed it more than the acting or anything.
And I think that if he would have taken it and done his M. Night thing where he takes the genre and flips it on his head, if he had really taken it and instead of making these weird pointless changes, if he had deliberately changed the tone, if he had deliberately changed sort of our expectations, I think that it would have been a way better movie if he would have done his thing instead of trying to hold on to so much of what we loved and then just changing the wrong things about it. And I think it made for sort of a messy movie in general.
I think something also, it really says something about Shyamalan that when asked what our favorite movies were and our least favorites, we all picked the same least favorite one.
Right.
So we're all willing to admit, yeah, he made a dud. We all had different favorite movies, though, because he's made so many really good movies. I mean, yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, I don't think he's made so many. He's made some really great movies, but not... I think, unfortunately, over half of his movies are objectively bad. But one thing I just want to quickly say about The Last Airbender, there's a YouTube channel called Just Right, and he analyzes like movies. You know, he'll analyze like certain aspects of movies, whether it be writing, directing. Like, for example, he made a video on Mad Max Fury Road talking about like why that movie is actually really brilliant from a filmmaking perspective, like with the writing and directing, and obviously visually that movie is amazing. But he made a 3-part series on The Last Airbender talking about why that movie is so flawed from a filmmaking perspective. And he, of course, makes fun of the acting and the fact that all the there's whitewashing with the casting.
Yeah.
And I actually highly recommend that you guys check out that 3-part series on YouTube. But one last thing I want to say about The Last Airbender that absolutely baffles me. Why is everybody pronouncing everything wrong in the movie? Like instead of Aang, it's Ang. Instead of Sokka, it's Soka.
It's
like everything
like
is
to make up for the whitewashing. They had to like give everybody this weird, almost ethnic
I don't know
if
it's even related. I almost just feel like he made changes. This is what it felt like the whole movie, and this is my largest criticism. He wanted to make changes for the sake of making changes, not to serve any purpose, just to make changes for the sake of making changes. I don't honestly know. I haven't delved into this. I don't know what pressure he was on from... I mean, was Nickelodeon in charge of this?
I mean, it was technically a Nickelodeon movie, I'm pretty sure.
Is it? Okay.
I
didn't know if rights were bought to it or something like that, but I don't know what kind of pressures were put on him. I don't know in private meetings who was saying what. If Shyamalan was the one putting his foot down and saying, if I'm going to make it, I want to make changes, or if other people were saying like, hey, you need to do something with this because we never felt like this fit right, or I don't know. I wasn't there for those meetings. I can't really attest, but I don't know. We can move on from this one. If you want.
Let's move. I don't want to do a like as cool as it would be. Actually, I'm actually like a little bit more eager now to talk about M. Night's career, but I do want to specifically talk about the Glass trilogy. So basically, M. Night starts out with two really great and somewhat lauded films, Sixth Sense and Unbreakable. And then those aren't his first movies, but they are his breakout movies. And then he makes Signs, which is still well regarded, but people start noticing like, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. Like something doesn't feel right. And then Village, Lady in the Water, Happening, Last Airbender, After Earth. People really don't like those movies. People even hate those movies to an extent. I think The Village gets a little bit too much hate, even though it has a lot of issues.
I actually really like The Village, and all I want to say about this one is I think The Village was really good. However, for all that they brought us through in the building up of the plot, the reveal wasn't enough.
That twist was terrible.
Yeah, it wasn't enough.
That twist was bad.
Honestly, though, I think the whole thing would have been good if the whole thing was kind of like, I imagine it as a short story. If it was a short story and there wasn't as much build up and it was a cute little thing to be a feature-length film, I don't really know about that. But if it was like a short story, I think that's a good idea for a short story.
I don't want to derail the discussion too much, but I just want to ask, like, how does M. Night get all these like really like famous actors like Bruce Willis, Samuel L. Jackson,
Joaquin Phoenix twice.
Joaquin Phoenix twice, really?
Right? Isn't he in?
He's in Signs.
He's in Signs and he's in The Village.
Oh yeah, he's in The Village. Oh my gosh! But also like William Hurt, Sigourney Weaver, Will Smith. Well, I mean, actually, Will Smith approached M. Night.
Right.
So, but like in Mark Wahlberg, Paul Giamatti, Jeffrey Wright. Like, how does he get all these actors to say all this like really crummy dialogue? Like how does he get all these? Like Jesse Eisenberg was in The Village.
Right.
Like how does he get? I mean, at the time,
that was
Jesse.
before
That was
Jesse,
before.
yeah.
That was before he was well known, right? But like, how does he get all these actors? Like that kind of baffles me. And James McAvoy in Split. Like, how does he get all these actors?
Well,
like,
I
That
think
was a great film.
Yeah, and specifically for that
but before that movie, his reputation was extremely tarnished. So like, and James McAvoy had to be aware of that. So how did M. Night convince James McAvoy to be in
because
Split?
think about the content of the movie. He probably came to him and said, "I need someone who has a broad depth of different characters that they could do."
But how is he able to like get James McAvoy to even agree to meet with him?
Well, I mean, if someone said to you, "I think that you're the one who can make this come to life, and it will be a testament to your acting prowess."
Oh my gosh, if you want to make sure you don't get shoved into a specific niche to what James McAvoy did, that whole, I almost feel like
he's done everything. I feel
yeah, no, I mean, I feel like that showed off such a wide range of his potential acting skill that I think that it's, even if it had been a bad movie, his acting was so good and showed off so many different sides of his abilities that I think that it's just a good thing to have on your resume, to have like this crazy character who's like a bunch of different people. And also M. Night Shyamalan, while his name had been tarnished, he's come up with some pretty good films, and not everybody thinks of some of those middle films as bad. And so maybe he liked M. Night Shyamalan.
And I mean, also, I think this is a great example because there aren't that many different actors in Split. I think it's one of those examples of the whole movie lived or died, not really because of the directing so much, although it was very well directed. I think the whole movie lived or died based on the acting of their one actor.
Right,
If he had been a poor actor,
the whole film would have tanked.
No amount of acting would have, no amount of directing would have brought it back.
Right. After Unbreakable, a lot of M. Night's following films, some of them still well regarded, but most of them definitely not well regarded at all. And then he decides, after Earth, he's like, okay, I'm going to go back to my roots, kind of, and do a low-budget horror film. And so he comes up with the idea for The Visit. And I actually vividly remember watching the trailer for The Visit and being like, oh, this actually looks kind of intriguing. And then at the very end, like, it's almost as if they were trying to... Universal, who distributed the film, were trying to hide the fact that M. Night made the movie, because only at the very, because usually for trailers they'll be like from Steven Spielberg, from James Cameron, like almost at the very beginning of the trailer, but throughout the whole trailer they weren't showing like who the director was. And then at the very end, when they were like rated PG-13, they showed text that was like from M. Night Shyamalan, and I was like, ooh, they're hiding.
I actually had no idea until we started kind of diving back in for this podcast that movie was by M. Night, and I had seen it and enjoyed the movie. I thought it was fine. I didn't think that it was like exceptional in any way, but it definitely had the Shyamalan twist and some like that dry melancholy and those kinds of things that you expect from him. And so now looking back, I'm like, oh, I definitely see it. But I had no idea at the time that was from him.
I saw the trailer, and once I saw his name, I was like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna watch this movie. This movie's going to suck. But then I finally gave it a chance. I actually watched it after Split. Like, I heard great things about Split, and I was like, is M. Night back? Really? And then so I watched Split, and really liked it a lot. And then I gave Visit a chance and actually enjoyed that movie. Again, it's not great. It's not even good. It's solid. Definitely has issues similar to a lot of M. Night's other films, but I don't know. I can see. I think Visit, even though Visit didn't do super well, like critics thought it was fine. It made a modest amount of money at the box office, but I think that Visit actually like helped M. Night to make Split. Like Visit helped him to make Split, and it has a same producer, Jason Blum of Blumhouse Productions. Jason Blum is doing really well in Hollywood right now. He is behind some of the more popular and financially successful horror movies like Get Out, Us, The Invisible Man, which I saw, by the way. It's actually not bad. And I actually would recommend it if you like slow burn psychological thrillers, watch Invisible Man. But yeah, Jason Blum, he's behind he's doing really well in Hollywood right now, and I think that and he gave M. Night a shot, and I'm thankful. I'm thankful, but also disappointed in that because we got Split, but then we also got Glass, which really let me down a lot. Like,
Oh my goodness.
but we'll talk about the quality of the films later. First, I want to ask you guys this. So, Split was revealed in a twist at the end that's actually a sequel to Unbreakable, 16 years after Unbreakable came out. Now, M. Night claims that he actually came up with the idea for Split in interviews promoting Split. He claims that he came up with the idea for Split, and he was going to make it right after Unbreakable, but decided to do Signs instead because he got funding for that movie. But I don't know if I quite believe him. Like, I have a feeling that he only came up with the idea for an Unbreakable Split, like, after maybe making After Earth or The Visit, and he's like lying about coming up with the idea back in 2000 or 2001 to sort of like make himself look a little bit better. I don't know. I maybe I should give him the benefit of the doubt, but I just want to ask you guys, like, do you guys think that he's telling the truth about coming up with this idea back in 2001, or do you think that he's just talking out of his butt?
Speaking from the perspective of a writer, when you build a world, when you come up with it, there's a whole lot before and after. You don't just see the small picture, you see a lot more around it. I would not be surprised at all if in making the movie Unbreakable that he did intend to go somewhere with it, that he did have something that would come after it, whether he was going to do kind of like what we're seeing as the Shaymalan thing right now of there is more to that story, but I'm intentionally not going to make a sequel because, you know, some people want sequels to other things that he's done.
Right.
I wouldn't have been surprised if he intentionally didn't make a sequel to it at the time and then later on decided I actually will do it. But I have no doubt that he had more in store for that story, whether he was going to tell that story or not. But also, whether or not it like your question of whether or not he actually had intention of it at the time, I don't think that matters as much as the fact when I watched the movie Split with my friends, we all got that wonderful, that gasp, that aha moment at the end where no one saw that this was a sequel to like a 16-year earlier film. No one saw that coming, and I mean, that's classic Shyamalan. And I mean, I don't think Shyamalan gets much better than those moments where at the end you have that aha moment and you're like, I honestly didn't see that coming.
Right. Do you have any thoughts on this, Tabitha, or do you just not really care?
Well, I mean, I think that it's really difficult to comment on this because you can never know the honesty of someone. I definitely do think that it probably when he was writing Unbreakable or coming like actually creating the movie, I think that probably there was more to that world, like William was saying. I think that he was wise to hold it until now when his audience was kind of prime for this thing. I think that if he had released it back then it, like, if he had this idea back then, it probably wouldn't have been as well received as it was now, and he certainly wouldn't have the same kind of resources and actors that he does now. He would have had to work with what he had then, and it would have been a totally different product. I think that what he created was perfect for its time. I think that that's why it was so well received. We're really into psychological thrillers right now, and that's really what this came down to in Split. And we were really into superheroes, and so to kind of see those two worlds collide in a way that was honestly unique, which I really like about the Glass trilogy.
I think that, I don't remember which one of you said it, but you have a good point that it doesn't really matter. But I do think that this question that I asked, but I think that regardless of when he came up with the idea for Split, it definitely was a strategic move on his part to make Split like years later, to make Split like after like The Visit or whatever, to sort of boost his career, to boost his career and improve his name, because
shake off some failures.
Because his, like I said before, his name was box office poison. Like, people in the at my reaction to the Visit trailer, I was interested, but as soon as I saw his name, I was like, oh, that's going to be bad. And in the YouTube comments for a trailer, I kept seeing, oh, this is going to suck. Oh, M. Night shit upon or whatever. And yeah, so I think that, but, you know, Split definitely helped improve his name a little bit. And Glass was actually one of my most anticipated films of 2019. I remember being so stoked for that movie. I was like, oh my gosh, this movie's going to be amazing. The trailer looked great. Samuel L. Jackson, Bruce Willis, and James McAvoy all together, and Sarah Paulson, who I'm a big fan of her as an actress. And then I saw the movie, and I have some opinions, some not so great opinions. I think half of the movie is excellent, but the other half is really stupid.
So what are some of your specific grievances with the film? Because we both come from the perspective of we like it. The ending is poetic.
Yeah, I disagree. The ending is unnecessarily symbolic. No, I would agree the ending is poetic, but that's why I don't like it. That twist with there being a whole secret society is one of the stupidest things I have seen probably in a movie ever. And also, there's no, why would Casey, the girl from Split, and Bruce Willis' son, and Samuel L. Jackson's mom, they don't really know each other. Why would they come up with this plan to release the Samuel L. Jackson's secret footage about superheroes in the train station and them holding hands at the end of the movie? Before the whole confrontation in Glass with Bruce Willis and James McAvoy fighting each other, they've never seen each other before in their. I don't think they've seen each other before the second half of the Glass movie. So why all of a sudden are they being all buddy holding hands and coming up with this plan? Oh, we're going to fulfill Samuel L. Jackson's plan to let the world know that superheroes exist. And I'm like, this is really stupid to me.
I mean, a traumatic experience does bring people together. They all were.
I feel like this experience, though, would make them not want to have anything to do with each other, though. Like, I don't know. I feel like that'd be a bit more realistic.
I mean, but potentially, but they all felt silenced in the same way. Mm-hmm. They all lost someone because this secret wasn't supposed to get out. But then they have the secret, and they have they're the gatekeepers of this secret, and they can let it out to the world. They can bring down this society. I don't know. I feel like I've seen in times of crisis, I've seen people come together to fight back against the thing that caused the crisis or the tragedy or whatever.
Yeah, I also think that this idea that they want the truth to be out there, just I know that I wouldn't want to be in this situation where I'd have to feel like I was living a lie or that I was a complete psycho because I believed that superheroes were real. Like, you'd only have those two other people to associate with. They're the only people who believe what you have to say. And so I actually think it's pretty realistic that they would have stuck together and that they would want to share the truth. I think the thing that I actually appreciate most about this trilogy is the realistic stance on superheroes. I think that it's super realistic that they would want to keep superheroes under wraps. I think that either...
But a whole secret society of them?
I think that they were probably planted by the government. We don't know any backstory for these people.
And we only have these superheroes to go off of, but who's to say that there haven't been lots more? Who's to say this isn't a kind of common occurrence and that they search for the red flags of the start of another one and then they go put it down?
I feel like I would be more okay with the secret society thing if it was actually if we've known about it for the whole movie. Like, if maybe in the beginning of the movie, if we saw a clip of the secret society being introduced in the beginning of the movie, and then we proceed to tell the story of Bruce Willis, Samuel L. Jackson, and James McAvoy all being locked up in the mental facility, I feel like the movie could have not improved significantly, but I feel like it would have been a bit of an improvement if we had known for the whole movie what Sarah Paulson's true intentions were, and so it'd be more of a...
I disagree. I think that the movie would have been compromised as a whole, especially as a Shaymalan, and we know that there's going to be a twist, right? Especially,
but does there have to be a twist?
There kind of
It's
does,
trademark.
though. Yeah, it's his trademark. It's his place that he's carved out within the film industry. But I think even without it being Shyamalan, I think it still would have been compromised a little bit if we knew the intention right off the bat. Think to any movie, you don't always know the intentions off the bat. The intentions can come later. I would go as far as to say this. It would have maybe been more of an aha moment if in each of those movies there were things that you just briefly catch on newspapers or on because they watch the TV.
Or the clover would have come up somewhere else.
Or the clover would have the clover tattoo that they all bear would come up somewhere else. And maybe we see the footprint of them, but we don't think that they have anything to do with superheroes or anything like that. Maybe just the mention of a secret society here. The clover tattoo on someone, on a somewhat main character in one of the first two movies. Those sort of things, I think, would have been...
more satisfying.
Yeah, more satisfying when you see the reveal, but I completely disagree.
Yeah, and I think that actually one of the best parts of Glass was this whole back and forth, I was feeling at least, about wait a minute, was all this a psychosis? Is everything we've been watching fake? Because we're in the same boat as the super people at this moment, where we're okay, she's trying to convince us this is fake. Is it fake? I actually have no idea. I mean, I'd like to believe that it's real because that would sort of make all the other movies a little less interesting, but I think that the fact that was kept hidden is part of the fun back and forth of the Glass film.
And I think that's the beauty of a Shyamalan. We're all knowing that there's a twist, and we're wondering, in the middle of the movie, is the twist that it's all in their head? Is the twist, and because you know it's coming, but you don't know what it's going to be. And that's kind of the beauty that another director might not have had that ability to weave such doubt. You would normally think in a movie, you would think, oh, we all know that it's going to all work out for our heroes, or we all know that, yes, of course there's superheroes all along, but you don't really get that knowledge, in fact, until the very end, where all of our protagonists die. You weren't sure if they were going to live, but you thought they were going to live, but then they didn't. I don't know. Shyamalan has the ability to shroud as you're watching the movie, the rest of the movie is all shrouded.
Because you expect to have a direction that's unexpected.
Yeah. And
that is really exciting from M. Night to see this sort of back and forth and him playing with this expectation of the unexpected,
I don't know. I just feel like Bruce Willis doubting that he has powers undermines... That was basically the whole plot of Unbreakable was him discovering his powers and him learning to be a hero and a proper role model for his son, and a better husband to his wife. And I feel like just him, like I really wish that Bruce Willis had something else to do in Glass other than doubting himself, because wasn't that the whole point of Unbreakable? Unbreakable is he's like Unbreakable is him not only discovering but him trying to run away from doubting himself and running away from this role as a hero, despite Samuel L. Jackson constantly like pushing him, being like, you can be the hero, you have all these abilities, you can be the hero. And then all of a sudden in Glass, it only takes like 2 days for Sarah Paulson to be like, oh, it's all in your head. And then Bruce Willis is like, oh, it's all in my head. I'm not a hero. And I don't know. I feel like Bruce Willis's presence in Glass was, in my opinion, extremely misguided and kind of a missed opportunity. I did really like James McAvoy and Samuel L. Jackson's subplots in Glass, though. However, if it were me making Glass, I would have had Bruce Willis do something completely different in Glass, and I wouldn't have had Casey in Glass at all. Like why was Casey in Glass?
Yeah.
Like, why was she?
Honestly, she probably was brought into it because the actress, I don't actually know her name.
Anya Taylor-Joy.
There you go. And
Who's gonna be in the New Mutants movie.
Oh, very
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
Very cool. I really want to see that.
Mhm.
It actually, in some ways, it gives me similar vibes to the whole Glass. I mean, there are similar themes there.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think probably the reason that she was included in it whatsoever is because she, as an actress, wanted to be included. She was a main actress in the film that came right before
Like
it.
one of two.
Her story ended though with Split. Like,
It
Yeah.
did, and there was no reason for her to further her connection
Right,
with
right.
her. I mean, there is the whole Stockholm Syndrome idea.
But you see some of that come out for
and,
sure.
And people like have a tendency to rose-tinted glasses in the past and stuff like that. So I could maybe see where in reality maybe she would still have a fascination with the person who abducted her.
Especially the supernatural. Like,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we already know that the whole point of her story is kind of that she has suffered before. She has been through things. That sort of trauma kind of lends itself to the idea of seeking that out. So I guess I could see it, but from a storytelling perspective, I don't think she really needed to have a part in that movie.
yeah, I think that her purpose in the plot was just to sort of act as the Black Widow Hulk thing, where it's just like, I can soothe the monster, the beast inside, because that's basically her whole role throughout the movie. Is she's just like, no, I know there's somebody inside of you who cares, and that I thought it was pretty pointless to bring her in as well.
Yeah.
She served as like
Yeah.
a plot point to soothe the beast at some
And they
point.
all, I mean, from like a symmetry perspective, they each wanted to have that one person in their life who, and I think this is kind of what you're pointing to, that also feels forced. Each of the protagonists had a supporting, almost family member, not quite in the case of
The girl.
I'm trying to remember Split, his James McAvoy's character's name.
Kevin Wendell Crumb.
Crumb. Thank you. Yeah, Crumb. It's not truly family, but I think from a symmetry perspective, they were trying to kind of have that there, and I don't think it needed to be.
It definitely did not need to be,
Yeah.
and also that twist. And not like there was actually the twist of the Secret Society was a second twist. There was a first twist of Bruce Willis's son revealing that. So at the end of Unbreakable, it was revealed that Samuel L. Jackson was responsible for the train crash that killed everyone on board
Right.
except Bruce Willis. And at the end of Glass, it was first revealed that Kevin's dad was on the train, and then Kevin's dad dying is what caused Kevin's mom to be so abusive. And so the Beast learns this and kills Samuel L. Jackson's character.
Right.
I felt like that twist. Why does everybody have to be like so connected.
I think that was part of Mr. Glass's plan, though. He was so obsessed with comic books, and if you look at comic books, that's really the way that things go. It's like this person's connected to this guy by, this random happenstance.
That's fair. And we said that there is a lesser feeling of like the willful suspension of disbelief, but there is some willful suspension of disbelief. You still have to kind of say, all right, I can swallow this plot hook to be entertained by what is to follow. That's still kind of part of swallowing the plot hook, is that this one event on the train, and this is everything that came out of it.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to believe that Mr. Glass had planned this all
And if he
along.
truly is like super mastermind, which is what he's portrayed to be, he's supposed to be like
The
super big
villain.
brain. Maybe it's foreseeable that he would see that out of this tragedy something else would arise other than just...
I can see for sure where you guys are coming from, and every concept in Glass was actually with the exception of the Secret Society, every concept plot point in Glass I actually think is cool, but I just don't think that all of them necessarily meshed well in the same movie. Like I don't know, and also now that I think about it, Unbreakable and Split, despite both being slow burn movies with quiet, meditative characters, they're kind of very different movies. Like Unbreakable is more of a drama, Split is more of a thriller, and I don't know, like it's really hard to mesh together genres. Like very few directors can mesh together different genres like comedy and horror or drama and thriller really well. Like I can only think off the top of my head a couple of directors that can do that, and I don't think that M. Night is quite there yet.
I would still say, and also, he didn't quite mesh them. We're not talking the same movie, right? That's
my point though. That's
Right,
my point though. Unbreakable and Split are very different movies with very different genres, and I just don't feel like Unbreakable and Split could have meshed together so well.
He's talking about for Glass. That's all.
For Glass,
For
Glass,
like
a combination of thriller and
drama. Yeah. Like it's Glass is a sequel to both Unbreakable and Split, but Unbreakable and Split like at the time I was actually really excited, but after watching Glass and upon reflection, I'm like, maybe Glass wasn't such a great idea. I don't know.
I don't know as it was necessarily the intent for it to be a marriage of like drama and psychological thriller. In my opinion, if I had to summarize it, I would say yes, there is more of a slow burn drama vibe to Unbreakable, definitely psychological thriller for Split, and then I would say Glass is something of its own. It is a third genre, though pegging that is a little trickier as to I could propose a couple things, but I don't think I'd quite
I feel like that doesn't really work though when you're making a trilogy. When you're making a trilogy, you can't really have one chapter or all of the parts of the trilogy be its own thing. There has to be some cohesion. There has to be cohesion.
I feel
there
like
has
the
to be
only cohesion here is the plot line.
That's my point. There needs to be more than that. There needs to be a cohesion of genre. There needs to be consistency in character motivations and all that. Like you can't it's really different. It's really difficult to get away with having a trilogy, but have the parts of the trilogy be like very different, or have one part be very different. Like again, it's a very ambitious idea, and I applaud M. Night for being ambitious, but I just don't think he pulled it off. But what you're saying, that's exactly my point. Is that you're saying that the only cohesive aspect of all three movies was the ongoing storyline, but there needs to be more than that, in my opinion.
I do think that I see your point there. I think that there's slightly more cohesion than just plot. I do think that character motivation stays pretty cohesive. I think that even certain like undertones of the films stay pretty cohesive.
Yeah, it still feels like a
It
Shyamalan.
feels like a Shyamalan through and through.
Yeah.
But I do think that it could use a little more meshing of those two. I could see that because while you were talking about genres, William, I started getting to the point where I was like, what is Glass exactly? And the fact that I can't pinpoint exactly what genre it is or falls under, I mean, that's a little bit a Shyamalan thing. But it's also kind of maybe just bad writing thing. The voice
Maybe.
doesn't feel cohesive.
It's a little bit like mystery suspense or something like that, or
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So it's hard to peg down exactly what it is, and maybe that I might have to concede your point there, Colton, that it definitely feels a little less cohesive than it could in that way.
I think that genre is, in general, is overrated. I think genre is a good way to find movies that you like. I think genre is a good way for a studio to put out a movie and appeal to a certain group of people who have a predisposition toward that genre. But they already had a target audience. The target audience were the ones who liked the movies that came before. They were probably going to watch it anyway. Once you get into a movie, the fact that you can't quite say, what genre did this fit in? Well, I think it's kind of irrelevant. Did you like what was presented or not? I mean,
it's also, I think the reason that I'm saying that it's a problem is not because of genre or being able to put it in a box, but more for a cohesive voice. I think that the voice within the three movies, two very distinct voices, we can kind of tell. And then the third one, I can't quite tell you exactly what it's trying to say or what emotions it's trying to emit. Some I can, like that idea of mystery, figuring out, but I really couldn't tell you exactly what feelings I'm supposed to be feeling during the film.
But we could point to a lot of movies who are fairly similar to the vibes that come out of Glass, and I don't feel like you'd have the same thoughts about those movies, even though they kind of would almost fall into a same genre.
Yeah, I think I actually, the more I think about Glass, the more I get frustrated by it. Like you brought up something that I actually had never really considered until just now. What is the genre of Glass? And I mean that as a criticism. I think that there are movies where not being able to quite identify the genre works in its favor. Have you guys seen the horror movie It Follows?
Yeah.
I actually really like that movie a lot.
It Follows, well, despite it being advertised as a horror movie, it isn't quite that. It mixes elements of thrill, suspense, drama.
Yeah, it's eerie.
Yeah.
It's very indie.
Fun fact, by the way, M. Night Shyamalan, after watching It Follows, hired the cinematographer of that movie to shoot Split and Glass. And that's why Split and Glass also looks really good.
Oh.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense to me why It Follows would appeal to M. Night Shyamalan so much.
Right. Yeah. And It Follows is kind of not directed by M. Night Shyamalan, but it could have been. Like it had a twist. It's very slow paced. Characters aren't really that like
has that eerie undertone.
So but like it follows. If you guys haven't watched it, I gotta warn you guys, if you're like more sensitive to like inappropriate content or scary stuff in general, then I advise you not to watch it. But
some naked old people,
right, ugh, yeah. Why do horror movies why do horror movies like why are naked old people, like in The Shining and It Chapter 2? I'm like, no, I don't want to see that. Game of Thrones also naked old woman, and I'm like, no.
Also,
no.
What you were just talking about, shoot.
I also just Googled it for anyone who's interested. The official genre tags put onto Glass are drama, sci-fi, and thriller.
That makes sense. Yeah. Sci-fi, really? I guess.
Well, I mean, all the superhero stuff, it always gets lumped into either sci-fi or fantasy.
Yeah.
And since they did not go a fantastic route with this, they went with the route of These are just mutations in your body. You're just an exemplary human.
I see. Well, I don't know. I just feel like, I don't know. Like, at the time, I thought it was a really cool idea, but after seeing the movie, I'm not sure if Unbreakable Split needed to be a trilogy. Like, I don't know. Like, if I were M. Night Shyamalan, I would do a lot of things differently, not just with his trilogy, but with all of his movies. I think that despite M Night having more misses than hits, in my opinion, I still admire his ambition. I think he's a great idea man. Doesn't always execute his ideas well, but I think that he's a great idea man, and I think that I know that he is the main producer on this show on Apple TV Plus called Servant, which is a horror show. I haven't seen it, but I've heard decent things about it. You know, not great, not bad, but decent. My grandma actually has, because she owns the Apple TV and we get Apple Plus because of that, so I could watch it. I don't know if I will, maybe. I do, even though M. Night has really like so many misses, in my opinion, I still admire him, and I think that most of his films at least have good aspects in them. Like even his terrible films like Lady in the Water, Last Airbender, After Earth, there is something in those movies that is actually good. Like there is one good scene in Last Airbender, and it's a flashback of Aang learning that he's the Avatar and him running away. You remember that from the show, and probably from the movie as well.
Sure.
That flashback of Aang learning that he's the Avatar, running away, freezing himself in Appa and ice, is the only good scene in that movie. Everything else is hot doo-doo, in my humble opinion. But I think that, I don't know. Do you guys I think I know the answer to this question already, but do you guys still admire M. Night as a director? And for his next film, whatever he comes out with next, will you guys watch it?
I always get excited to see when something says M. Night Shyamalan. I think that he's done a good job of carving out his niche in Hollywood. He's had his rocky moments and his falling out with like Disney and stuff like that.
Right.
He's had his rocky moments, but I think everyone kind of goes through a period of, especially after a great success, finding yourself after that success, not getting typecast or carving out your niche, whichever the negative or the positive, whichever you like to see.
Yeah, I think that I actually mostly agree with your opinion, Colton, that he is super good with ideas but doesn't always execute them very well.
Most of the time, I don't think.
And I actually think that that's kind of true if you look at the quality of the movies that he puts out in kind of those objective ways that you're talking about. I do kind of think that a lot of the time they are bad, but his movies are enjoyable because of the cool ideas, concepts, and vibes that they put out. I think that those are his strong suits. And so ultimately, yeah, I'll watch it. It's usually a gamble as to whether I'll like it first shot or not, but it's ultimately always something that I look back on and I'm like, you know what? It wasn't a waste of time to watch that movie. I feel pretty good about having watched it. It was an interesting concept, and there's always some sort of ride that you're on throughout the film.
Yeah, I will say in M. Night's defense, not like only a couple of his movies I found boring. Like most of his movies, whether intentionally or unintentionally, I found them all consistently engaging and entertaining. Like that's something that M. Night, despite him having a very deliberately slow pace, I'm rarely bored watching an M. Night film. Like The Happening is horrible with the bad acting, but I'm consistently entertained. I'm never bored. So I think that I will be at least intrigued for whatever upcoming projects he comes up with. Not sure if I'll watch them, but I admire his passion, his ambition, and I will be intrigued with what he comes up with next. And I think that a perfect home for him right now would be with Universal Pictures and Blumhouse, who, like I said earlier, is doing well with Get Out, Us, and Invisible Man. All right, so I think I'm going to end things off right there. I want to thank you guys again, William and Tabetha, for being on my podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We had a great time.
Thank you guys so much for watching this podcast racing. See you guys in hopefully 2 weeks, and thank you again for listening.